Okay, next thing we need to do is take that fuel rail off. This is the fuel rail. Basically, it's a line that holds fuel in it, provides fuel for the fuel injectors. The fuel pressure regulator, which is right here, controls how much pressure is in the fuel rail. It'll have a consistent pressure at all times so that all the injectors have the proper pressure. This is also a very common part to fail, and also has been known to cause a lot of problems with these intakes. We had a colleague of ours bring us an intake which, because of this little fuel pressure regulator, it had failed. It had backed fuel and some vapors into the intake, and it actually backfired and exploded the intake out. Now this is a 1995. On the 96 or 7s, the later model ones, they have a slightly different intake. It's very similar design, but it's slightly different. This is the intake. If you have a later model, this intake actually exploded because the fuel pressure regulator failed. So if you have this year, make, model vehicle, you're going to want to replace that that fuel pressure regulator, or it actually can explode the entire intake. This is what the intake looks like. You're not supposed to be able to see this view, but we got a nice cutaway view of it. This is the baffles for the air to go down into each cylinder. Each one of these ports is one of the cylinders. There's 3 on each side, obviously. It forces the correct amount of air into the cylinder for it to burn. So that's an old one we got from one of our colleagues, dropped off. Okay, so to release this fuel rail, first thing to do, a good thing to do, is release the fuel pressure. There's not a huge amount of pressure, but there's enough to where it'll squirt out at you. There's 2 ways to do that. There's two ways to do it properly. Number 1, just pop the fuel cap off in the gas tank. That'll relieve the pressure on some of the side of it, the return side. As far as the supply side, there's actually a connector here, which it's got a cap on it. It looks like a bicycle tire. It's a Schrader valve, and it has a little, just like your bicycle tire does, it has a little air, a little piston or little thing in there you push down, it'll relieve the pressure out. This is where you would hook up to read fuel pressure. If you had a fuel pressure gauge, or to clean the fuel injectors, you screw right into this, run the solution through there, it cleans the injectors. Also, you can relieve the fuel pressure. So I'm going to go pop the cap off the fuel filler, relieve that, and then I'm going to come over here and I'll relieve that, and you'll see the fuel come out of here. Watch your eyes so you don't get fuel in them. And if you see that, you see a little fuel squirted out of there. Now that's basically all the pressure that's in it. I just pushed it in, let the pressure out. Now you'll still get some fuel spillage, but it won't squirt at you, and mainly it won't squirt you in the eyes. And then this isn't really held on He-Man tight. It's barely on at all. It's got these 2 bolts here. I don't see any other bolts. Yeah, there's another one right there, and another one right there. And it basically just holds the fuel rail into place. What holds the fuel injectors in place is they basically are just suction, kind of just sitting right in there. They got an O-ring that holds them in place. So I'm going to take all these 4 bolts off. They're 10 millimeters. I'm going to pop each injector out, and you take this entire fuel rail off at once. Also, this fuel rail has quick disconnects. Basically here, there's these 2 little plastic things that are held in, and to get these off, if you needed to get these off, there's a tool to get them off. You can hold these right in and pull them right off. There's one. You do not need a special tool for this, although they do make one. This one's so easy to get to that we didn't really need it. And that one's off. Now, you could get some fuel running out of there too, but that's okay. Gravity, there's something to say about gravity. If you hold the lines low, fuel will drain out. If you lift them up, it won't drain out. So, now we got that loose. Let's go ahead and pop these bolts off. Okay, that's all the bolts for the fuel rail. Now, before you lift it up, you got to pop each one of these injectors. Needs to be popped out of the intake. This is the lower intake, and we need to pop each one of these injectors out. To do that, just use a big flathead screwdriver. I'll show you how. Okay, so basically each one of these injectors is just kind of seated in the intake. Now they have a little step right here, and they have another step a little bit lower, and then they have an O-ring. The O-rings we're going to replace, and we'd recommend replacing these always anytime you pop them off. But you can damage them by trying to take them off. If you're replacing them, don't really worry about it. If you don't have new ones, then just be as careful as you can. You can replace them later. Let's say you don't have the O-rings, you're doing this job. It's something you'd want to do at the same time, but if you had to do it later, you certainly could. And again, to get these out, you basically just pry up on each one. And I twist the flathead just like that and lift them up a little bit. And they'll lift right up, and then you can actually see the bottom, which the bottom ledge, which is right here. And if I get right in there and just turn, instead of using it to pry this way, if you turn your screwdriver that way and use the back side of it to pry up, you get more distance. So that one, it actually just popped right up and just pops right out of there. And these are the O-rings. The red part is actually part of the injector. The O-rings are at the very base. And there's all kinds of crap and dirt and stuff in there. When you get those up, pry the 3 back ones up. And that's it. That's the entire fuel rail and all 6 injectors at once. There'll still be some fuel in there. If you ever wonder why you should get a fuel injection cleaning, this is just the part you can see. And they're just filthy. There's all kinds of crud built up around them. You can't really see the fuel because it sprays out in a mist. But if there's any crud or crap in there, it's good to clean these out. Also, if you had a failed injector, this is time to replace it, or a leaky injector. A lot of times you can tell a leaking one because it's the cleanest one. These are all pretty the same dirty. So we're going to put this to the side. This is the fuel pressure regulator. This can be replaced. All you do is unscrew it. It's got a big pipe thread here, and it's got a hex. Actually, it's got a Torx bit right there. Take that off and replace that whole thing. It also plugs into the fuel rail, and this regulates the fuel going in and out. It also keeps the same pressure all the way around.